The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's guest is here to talk to us about one of the most important pillars of health, our gut health. Let's welcome Brendan Coates.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I say this, everyone, because I briefly talked to Brendan before we started, and there's some surprises. I don't even know what's going to come out of his mouth, but it's going to be interesting, and I know this.
Life is meant to be full of surprises.
Sure is. All right, so I'm going to start with something serious because I know it's going to go off the rails real fast. So on a serious note, I wanted to talk about the gut being the second brain, since that's something very commonly spoken about with doctors and people in general are talking about that more and more, how it's our second brain. What does this mean?
Sure. Great question. The gut is, I used to think even sometimes it was the first brain. So if we look at the autonomic nervous system, and if we look at the pathway from the vagus nerve going right from the base of our brain all the way down to our gut, there's roughly around, the ratio is almost 1 to 10. So however many signals are going from our brain to our gut, there's 10x more signals going from our gut all the way up to our brain. So that's why people say that our gut is our secondary brain. How we perceive the world, how we perceive events, people, challenges, ultimately that has a major influence on our gut, our diversity of our microbiome, the bacteria, how we either digest things, not just food, how we're able to adapt to things. All of those have a major influence on our gut, and our gut has a major influence on how we adapt to the world around us. So it is absolutely the second brain indeed.
So do you want to talk then about gut feelings and that term in general? I feel like that's something you could easily speak to because people don't understand that, why we get these gut feelings. But I mean, you really do feel it in your gut.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a different perspective as well as your viewership and your listenership. Oftentimes people will mistake their intuition from their gut feelings or their gut. Like I said, gut feelings. Intuition is the silent whisperer, if you will, trying to bring us back into equilibrium and trying to whisper us to let us know that, hey, whatever that we're perceiving right now, there's potentially an upside if we're thinking that, something's really bad. Or if we're thinking that something's really good, our intuition is trying to whisper us and letting us know, hey, there's actually a downside to this thing that we're infatuated with. Gut instinct is not the same as our intuition. I use gut instinct as the same as impulse and instinct. So impulse is when you are consciously aware of the positive of an event, of a person. How many of your audience can relate to this? If you've ever been infatuated with someone, you're really consciously of all the upsides, right? You're putting them up on a pedestal. You think, oh my God, they're so pretty. They're so great. All those things. but you're unconsciously suppressing all of the drawbacks. And so your intuition is whispering, hey, there's actually drawbacks to this person. Gut instinct is what you are impulsively pursuing. Now, the same thing with instinct. When you have a natural instinct, you are typically repelling from something that you're trying to avoid. Your intuition is trying to whisper to you, hey, that thing that you're perceiving is really, really bad. There's actually some upsides to it. Let me try to show you the upsides. Again, so that's intuition. Instinct, impulse, that's gut. Intuition, that's more so your higher self. That's your heart. That's your soul. So a lot of people mistake the two, but they are completely the opposite. So if you really want to break it down, gut instinct is more so animalistic, amygdala within the brain.
Yeah.
Intuition is higher self, executive center in the brain, and more logical.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting explanation, because I feel like I struggle to explain intuition to people, and sometimes I explain it as your gut, but I also know it's not necessarily your gut, because your gut like has those anxious feelings, and like you're saying, the amygdala feelings, like it's not actually your intuition, but it's like, and I'm like, gosh, I'm totally explained that incorrectly, I would say. Yeah.
Writers, authors, all sorts of people, they mistake it. So this is properly understanding just the English language and the correct usage of words.
Yeah.
Intuition is not the same as instinct or impulse. They're completely different. Gut instinct, gut feelings, also not the same as intuition. The easiest way to remember it is intuition is like an engine governor, right? You know what a governor does? It prevents from revving up too high.
Yeah.
So intuition is the reciprocal opposite of instinct and impulse. And I learned this from the works of Dr. John DeMartini. So when you understand intuition, then you can just kind of understand impulse and instinct. All three completely different.
Yeah, this is so interesting, because last night I was having a conversation with a friend, and she was talking about this guy she's been dating. And I mean, I know he's bad news. She knows he's bad news. I mean, there've been a lot of red flags.
Sure.
And she's like, but there's something there. And I was like, is there? I said, you've told me a lot of things that are just really bad characteristically of him. I said, does he just like make you feel like you want to be your best self, and like you're just moving up in the world, and like you just feel like the best you've ever felt about yourself? And she's like, well, no. Like, well, then what is he doing for you? It's nothing. Like, it was just like, it was the struggle though, the struggle to finally get him to come around. And now he's finally starting to come around. And that's a whole nother
Well,
conversation.
she's ignoring the downsides. She's ignoring those. So she's putting him up on a pedestal for whatever reasons. And the exact same degree of her putting him up on the pedestal is she's just minimizing herself. And she's too humble to admit what she sees in him is actually inside of her. So she's recognizing all the upsides. She's in the amygdala. She is in the pursuit of hedonistic activity, pursuit of pleasure, and avoiding pain. Eventually, her intuition will continue to whisper her, and then it'll humble her. And then she'll realize that he actually had some drawbacks. How much time that'll take, we don't know.
But anyway, let's dive into you being the gut whisperer.
Sure.
And how did this even come about?
I didn't coin myself the gut whisperer. It was Baderus Kulian. I've got his book here. So he wrote Man Up. There it is. Man Up. Baderus Kulian. He is a very, very successful entrepreneur. He has mentored thousands and thousands of people all around the world. He's got an amazing story. And him and I were on a coaching call, and I was having a real tough time at my identity as a clinician, as a professional. And so he said, what do you do? What are some of the things that you offer? So I explained all the things that I do and how I help people. And he said, Brendan, you're the gut whisperer. That's what you do. I don't know anyone that's as talented and as skilled as you that understands the gut like you do. And I just said, I guess I am the gut whisperer. And so I've been the gut whisperer ever since.
Well, what made you become the gut whisperer? Did you have gut problems? Were people coming to you with gut problems?
Sure.
What made you start learning so much about the gut?
Yeah. It's kind of a two-parter. There's one, my back end story, which I won't go there yet because you've asked a direct question. So I'll answer the direct question with a direct answer.
You go wherever you want to go.
Well, I used to live in the Caribbean. I used to own my own party boat company in Jamaica, and then I got sort of bought out, and then I moved to the Cayman Islands, and I was an event coordinator there. When I moved back from the Caribbean back to Canada, I got hit with just a ton of bricks of allergies. My eyes were watering, my nose was watering. I was going through a box of Reactin every week.
Mm.
And I sought out my mentor and I said, my allergies are horrible. He said, well, Coatzers, because that's my last name, Coatzers, you've got a leaky gut. And I said, what does my gut have anything to do with my allergies? And so he's, there. Let me educate you.
Okay.
So what happened then is I went to his clinic and we literally sat down for almost 3 hours, and he completely broke down all of the intricacies and the nuances of a gut and what the gut does and how digestion starts and what stomach acid does for the whole role of digestion, what the pancreas is responsible for, and ultimately how undigested foods can initiate little micro tears within the gut. And that continuously perpetuates into leaky gut, also known as hyperintestinal permeability. And the more someone allows that cascade to continue to happen, the more of an ongoing immune response is going to happen to the body, trying to essentially extinguish the inflammation, trying to attack the foreign invaders. And the body thinks that those undigested foods are foreign invaders. And so that continuously exacerbates an ongoing immune response. And if the immune system continuously gets more and more exerted, it's going to get tired and it's going to be less effective.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are exposed to all sorts of environmental toxins and pollutants, in my case, my body wasn't able to manage that. And so I was expressing so much of a histamine response and the watery eyes and the runny nose and the inflammation, not because of the allergies, not because of the pollutants. It's because I had a suppressed and a weak immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, if ragweed, dust, pollen, and grass was a true allergen, every single person would be allergic, right? We wouldn't be able to function. So that's not the case. What's the problem? The problem is a compromised immune system. The problem is a leaky gut. So if you can heal and seal the gut, then in theory, and not really in theory, then a body can manage all of those pollutants and the allergens very, very easily. So that was my sort of awakening, figuring out that, oh my God, I had a leaky gut. And if I fixed my gut, my allergies would go away.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes a lot of sense because when you think about allergens there's nothing genetic about that, right? Like it's not a chromosome issue. And so it's like, well, what is the issue? And then it's obviously like you're explaining. So you learned all this stuff about the gut. And then what? How did you start becoming the gut whisperer?
Yeah, so like I said, it originally started with my own healing. And
Okay.
if we were to kind of backtrack just a little bit more, as a teenager, I played hockey. I remember specifically every March, give or take, I would develop strep throat. I think it was because there was a transition from cold arenas to a little bit of spring air in and out
Okay.
of the arenas, weakening my immune system a little bit, and I would develop strep throat.
Mhm.
Against my mom's wishes and directive, I continuously insisted that I need antibiotics. I need to kill the bacteria that's causing me to have strep throat. So I probably had one too many rounds of antibiotics, and I developed a little bit of a antibiotic resistance towards strep throat. And I kept on getting it every single year. Oh my God, it was horrible. And for your viewership and listenership that can relate to that, strep throat sucks. Oh my God, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So when I healed my gut, I stopped developing strep throat along with my allergies and so forth. When I realized that, I just wanted to scream this at the top of the mountaintops. I said to Doctor, how come no one knows this? Why don't the schools teach this? Why is the medical system just so broken and disconnected? I want to teach this. And he said, well, if you want to do this, it's wise to go to school, go back to school actually, and start to learn it. So he was teaching me. And then I decided to pursue it in clinical, well, not clinical at the time. It was just holistic nutrition. I turned into clinical afterwards.
Yeah.
So that was ultimately the tipping point for me to pursue that. At the same time, I was, when I moved back from the Caribbean, I needed cash. I needed to find money because I was kind of broke a little bit from some unexpected expenses when I was in the Caribbean.
Okay.
So I started to get ready for this. I went into male exotic dancing.
Okay, I have to tell everybody beforehand. He said, "Oh, I worked in adult entertainment," and I was like, yeah, I knew where this was going.
Yeah. You've got an idea, but I'm still going to throw you a couple maybe a curveball.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I was traveling all across Canada and the United States, I was with a very, very popular group. Their group was called Magic Male Review. And
So you're like a dancer.
oh yeah, stripper, real stripper. I stripped for 13 years. In fact, I paid for all of my schooling and my med schooling while dancing.
Okay. Well, okay. So, like, do I want to know? You just tell the story.
All right, let's continue. So while I was traveling,
I just think
dancing,
people are going to be like, is he in films? Should I be looking for films? I'm not looking for films.
there's probably some old footage kicking around somewhere on Facebook videos and things like that. Nothing that would originally, when I retired, I wanted to do.
I'm sorry.
It was a retirement, a long time, 13 years. My goodness. When I originally stopped, I really wanted to eliminate that part of my life
I
because I
can't
was,
even dance for 10 minutes. Oh, good for you.
yeah, try doing that in front of 300 screaming women naked on a stage. You tell
Yeah.
me how challenging that is.
I would, yep. No words. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah. So when I was dancing, I was traveling and all of that. And one night, a woman came up to me. Here, you're going to get another kick out of this. She said, Bronco, because that was my stage name.
I was
Bronco.
going to ask for the stage name. All right.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. So she came up to me and said, Bronco, I want you to take me to the VIP, but I don't want you to get naked. I want you to teach me how to lose weight. And I thought to myself, I'm like, all right, I can do that because it's pretty much the most in shape dancer out of all the guys.
Okay.
So we went back to the VIP.
Hold on.
And
What did Bronco wear? We got to paint a picture for every.
Well, what do you think based on that name?
You sound like a cowboy.
Yeehaw. Yeehaw.
Chaps. You wore chaps.
Chaps, cowboy hat. That's pretty much it.
Open butt.
Yeah.
Whole shebang. All right.
Whole shebang.
Back to it.
Back to it. All right. So we went to the VIP. We proceeded to sit down. And for about 15 minutes, I just told her everything that I thought would help her move the needle to get healthier. I taught her about nutrition. I taught her about exercise. I taught her about cardiovascular exercise. I taught her about intermittent fasting.
Were you showing her exercises? Were you demonstrating exercises?
No, I was really trying to just be a different person. I was actually me. I wasn't Bronco. Bronco at that moment, it was just Brendan. And
You left
so
Bronco on stage.
yeah, I left him on stage basically.
Okay.
And so what happened was afterwards, she got up, she gave me a big hug, and she went in her pocket and she took out $100 bill. And she said, "Thank you so much. You saved my life." And so she gave me the money. And at that moment, I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, this is my calling. I know that I can help people. And so
Okay. Well, can you tell us what you shared with this woman that was so like,
I
wow,
just
you
did.
but like all the little details of how she was going to lose the weight and how she was going to get her life back.
Super simple strategies. Manage your food intake. Wake up early, do fasted cardio, go for a walk. Wake up to the sunrise, go to the bed with the sunset. Try to avoid the news, TV, media, gossiping. All those things are distractions from your body. And the more disconnected you are from your body, the more you cannot decipher the signs and symptomatology that your body is trying to express to you, all
Did
through
you tell her-
negative feedback.
Did you tell her foods to avoid or
Yeah, I just said shop around the perimeter of the grocery store. Just eat vegetables and meat. Super easy.
okay?
I only had 15 minutes. I couldn't give her all fine details.
Hey, I didn't know how much time she paid for in this private room.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a wake up moment for me. It was really, really insightful. So then I really decided to pursue the schooling, which I already was. And with me traveling all across Canada and the United States, even internationally, what I decided to do was I created an online program of how to help women lose weight, essentially. So I created like a 90-day program. And literally from the West Coast to the East Coast, every city that I was traveling, I offered and I invited women to participate in my coaching programs. And it was incredible. So it's funny, maybe you've got a viewership that's watching right now and they're like, how does a guy who's bald and bodybuilder can relate to women? Well, in actuality, I can probably relate to women a heck of a lot more even than most women, because I spent 13 years, I call it in the trenches, learning about human behavior, women's psyche, relationships, their needs, their wants, their desires. And I was able to get to the most intimate, respectfully, the most intimate settings and really getting to learn what women wanted and what they needed. And so I created a program and I
So
literally helped
I'm
thousands of women.
I'm listening and thinking people are going to think, okay, you were a stripper. How would you know all these psychological pieces? But I'm going to assume this is things that you learned from the private rooms and the
Of
conversations that you
course.
had.
And
Okay.
just through observation, just through you
When
can
people are screaming more or less or leaning
you
in
can
or
of course you can learn a lot just by watching a woman's behavior, just by watching.
okay.
You can learn a lot just by watching anyone's behavior. You just
Okay.
have to have a little bit of curiosity, and there's got to be sort of a little bit of a motive. My motive wasn't just surface value. My motive was I want to learn how to help these people.
Mhm.
And so by doing so, I help thousands of people, thousands and thousands of women. I help women lose weight, get healthy, fix their hormones. I help women get out of abusive relationships. I helped women find themselves love for the first time because they became confident and then they found themselves in relationships. I've helped women conceive and start families and get married. It's been quite inspiring. So when you get healthy, you not only can give yourself permission to exit perhaps uncomfortable situations, but you also give yourself permission to excel. So that's ultimately what I got to experience. Really inspiring, contrary to what people might think. Oh, he's just a stripper. Yeah, well, it turned out pretty good.
Mhm.
You didn't see that coming, did you?
No, not when I booked this call. Definitely not when I booked this call.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
This will not air. No, I'm just kidding. Um, Yeah. I mean, I can totally understand that where people want the opposite sex. Like they want advice from the opposite sex. It makes total sense. I mean, I feel like men could come to me. I'm like, okay, how can I reach women better? Right? Like
Mhm.
I'm a woman, I know. Like, and if somebody's coming to you, I'm like, how can I be appealing to a man? And like, what can I do? And it's like you see it from a different perspective and they're tired of maybe the same exact perspective from a woman. And sometimes I'm not even going to get into this, so we'll just move on.
I think you got validity there. Of course, I agree.
Yeah. So emotional components. So can we talk about the emotional
Sure.
components? I know fear is a huge one with gut issues.
Hmm.
What do you see as the number one issue emotionally that people hold on to that causes their gut issues?
Great question. Good question. There are only, and for the listenership and the viewership, if you've got a pen and paper, you might find this valuable to write down. So please note this. There are only two fears in life: the perception of gain of that which we avoid, and the perception of loss of that which we seek. So I'll break that down again. There's only
Yeah.
two fears in life. It is the perception of losing something that you want,
Mhm.
and the perception of gaining something that you don't want. So,
And
and
when you
I'm gonna,
and it's greater when you believe that the loss is greater than the gain, then you hold on to this fear.
well, whatever the perception is, and I'll explain that. So again, there's two fears in life, and if you were to distill those fears, they're purely based on survival. That's it. And what are those survival fears? Life and death. So if you were to distill those, let's say you were fearful of gaining something that you didn't want. Okay, so if you distill that all the way to purely survival, to our most primitive state, let's say when we were hunter gatherers, if we were avoiding something that we didn't want to gain, what would that be? Well, being attacked or mauled by a bear or a
Yeah.
cat or something. And so the fear is ultimately dying by being killed, essentially. Okay, so that's fear of gain of that which we avoid, predator. The other fear is fear of loss of that which we seek, which is fear of losing something that which we want. If you were to distill that more, it's fear of losing our food. And if you were to distill that, what does that mean? It means fear of starving to death.
Mhm.
Okay, so if it's both death, then we need to ask an individual, what would you rather? Would you rather being mauled to death by the predator, or would you rather starving to death and missing out on the food?
Mm.
50% of your audience is going to say, I would rather be eaten to death. I would rather be killed. The other 50% would say, I would rather starve to death. So again, it's not one way is correct.
Right.
It's based on their perception, based on their epigenetics, based on
Mhm.
their hereditary paradigms that they've adopted within their life. That's ultimately going to dictate what fear is more driving than the other. Okay, so now that we've established that, there's only two fears. If in your friend's case, for example, she is fearful of losing him. So she's putting him up on a pedestal and she's minimizing herself.
But
So
it's him, I don't think it's him.
it's his traits. What do you mean? It's not something else. It's something that he's
It's
something that
nothing it's nothing about him though. It's what he offers her, but not even him as a person. It's what companionship means to her.
no, I'm
You know
going
what
to
I mean?
disagree
I
because the guy right beside him might have absolutely nothing that she desires. So it's something about him. There's some traits that she recognizes that she labels as good. His traits, actions, or inactions. One of the three. Something that he's doing, she's labeling that she's infatuated with that. She's attracted to that and she has impulsive behavior to draw towards that. So she's fearful of losing him because she's seeking him. She's purely in her amygdala. She's labeling him as prey and she wants him. She wants to lick him, kiss him, eat him up, nibble him up. Why? It's a survival mechanism. She wants him because he's the prey. She's minimizing
Well,
herself.
okay, and so I would agree saying he's the prey because it's like I'm saying it's not him. It's not him as a human. It's not, oh, he's the nicest man. There's nothing so special, and she has yet to say anything so special about him. It's the ideas that he offers her, but they're not real.
Whose ideas are they? Are they her ideas or are they his ideas?
Hers.
Okay, so it's still something about him that she's labeling good.
Yes, but they're false labels.
Regardless, that's because she's ignoring them. Let me
Yeah.
let me further explain this because you're
Okay.
going to understand because you're talking about the hunger or the fear cues and the gut.
Mhm.
So because she's fearful of losing him, and if you break down survival and you break down animalistic and the amygdala, she's in the pursuit of him. So she's going to minimize him or minimize herself, and she's going to be totally infatuated with him. So what happens if you are fearful of losing your prey? Well, there's a response hormone that's going to kick in, and it's called your ghrelin. Ghrelin is responsible for your hunger. And so if she's losing control with the relationship and she feels as though that she's going to lose him, as a compensation, what is going to happen? She's going to activate her ghrelin. And now all of a sudden she's going to start to have impulsive behavior towards food. Why? Because she can't control him. So now all of a sudden, to make herself feel good, she's impulsive towards cookies or ice cream and binge eating. And she's like, I don't know what it is. I can't control myself. I just feel as though that I have to keep on eating this and I can't control it. I don't know why.
Does it have to be towards food though?
I'm going to explain it in a second. Because she's fearful of losing him. Now, you make a great point. It all depends on what the perception is. And it all depends on what is readily available to her that she can control. In most cases, it's in the form of food. But let's just say she does not have food available to her. Then her impulse is going to turn into addictive behavior, whether it's pursuit of other hedonistic activities or the pursuit of obsessive compulsive behaviors. It's going to come in the form of maybe doom scrolling on internet, TV, binge watching, whatever she can control, she'll pursue that because she's feeling as though that she's losing control on the guy. And that's just a natural impulsive behavior. Now, on the flip side, if let's say someone is trying to avoid someone that they don't like, right? Let's say she eventually breaks up with that guy. And now she thinks like, oh, I hate him. He's a cheater. He's a jerk. He didn't treat me well at all. So now she's really repulsed by him. Okay, so if she's trying to avoid him, what's the fear? If we distill that, she's labeling him as the predator now, and she's trying to avoid him. So she's trying to run away. What hormone cues kick in if you're trying to avoid something? Leptin,
Okay.
because she doesn't want to eat, because she doesn't want to be attacked by the predator. So now all of a sudden, based on her stress, she's now under eating. She doesn't want to eat. She's stressed out. So based on her perception, based on the fear that she's labeling, either it's going to cue in ghrelin and it's going to increase appetite, binge eating, or it's going to cue and trigger the leptin, which creates sort of avoidance, not wanting to eat, under eating, and becoming malnourished. Both of those are still based around fears. So it depends on someone's perception of fear, then that will trigger either hunger cues or under eating.
Interesting. Okay. So can we roll into addiction then? Because I feel like you were kind of dabbling in that a little bit there, and how addictions come to play with the gut.
Of course, I've got over 1,000 hours in 2 different substance abuse clinics as a consultant. Probably one of the most rewarding positions I've ever had, because I get to work, or at the time I was working with individuals that are really at their lowest low. They're at their mercy and they just want to fix whatever the problem that they're having. So whether their addiction is in the form of consuming alcohol or cocaine or heroin or crack, porn, whatever the case may be, there's all sorts of different addictive behaviors.
Mhm.
So
Does it have to be food? Does it have to be substances? Are we talking in general, just addictions to shopping, addictions? Okay.
yeah,
And-
so
okay.
I'm labeling the a little bit more extreme ones so people can resonate with them a little bit, or so they can understand the extreme and the polarities of them. But there are addictions to shopping. There are addictions to gossip. There are addictions to social media. That's a big one. A lot of people can relate to that. You got to understand that the act of addiction is not the problem. And I'll say that again. The action of the addiction is not the problem. It's a temporary solution for that individual. And so the pursuit of that alcohol, or shooting up with the heroin or the drugs or the going online to buying things, all of those are a temporary solution to try to avoid something that they're unfulfilled with. And so the act of addiction, it's because they haven't found a viable alternative to fix that.
Mhm.
And another way to look at addiction is it is a program. It's a repetitive program, is it not?
Mhm.
And so this repetition of this action and this behavior is one of the most brilliant strategies that the conscious awareness can start to recognize as a pattern, as a behavioral pattern, to find and determine that, hey, what they're actually doing is not working. It's not fulfilling. It's not inspiring. And so here's another quote from Dr. John. When you fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, your day won't fill up with low priority distractions that don't. And so we need to ask ourselves, in the moment of that addictive behavior, what are we doing? Or what is that person doing?
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, 10 times out of 10, the moment just before they reach for that substance or behavior, they're doing something that's unfulfilling. In fact, it's so unfulfilling. Again, they're waking up their amygdala, and now they're in the pursuit of pleasure. And now they're trying to avoid that thing that they're labeling predator, all based on survival. And now they're in the pursuit of hedonistic activities, which is labeling it as pleasureful. And so each time someone is doing something that's unfulfilling, they will reach for that addictive behavior. And so that someone is addicted, it's feedback trying to let them know that they're actually pursuing things that are uninspiring.
Mhm.
And so addiction dissolves immediately when someone is pursuing things that are inspiring. And so it's the understanding that if you pursue things that are inspiring, you're not going to be compelled to do things that are addicting. But when you're doing things that are uninspiring, it's very easy to fall into the behavior of pursuing things that are addicting. So the addiction, again, it's a program, and it's a temporary solution to allow you to give you the feedback to get back to pursuing something that's inspiring. So the degree of someone's addictive behavior to the degree of how much it's sort of taking over their life
Mm-hmm.
is the degree of how unfulfilled they are in life.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So
I could.
it's finding a viable alternative. But most cases, people aren't consciously aware of a viable alternative.
Mhm.
So it's whatever the feeling that they're getting out of that behavior. Okay, whatever that is. So if it's in the form of alcohol, let's just say, what do they get out of drinking? What's the benefit out of drinking? People are going to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, there's no benefit of drinking. I got to stop. I got to quit." No, we didn't ask that. What's the benefit to the drinking? Well, maybe it numbs the pain. Maybe it helps them forget whatever, 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 whatever. Okay, well, what are we trying to numb the pain from? Okay, now we've got actually a sub addiction.
Mhm.
So it's not banishing and not putting a label on the addiction. It's identifying the sub addiction and finding a viable alternative to fix and correct that sub addiction. And
Okay.
ultimately, it's all about fulfillment.
So this leads me to something interesting, which maybe I think you'll be able to speak on this. It's just, it always blows my mind. So I don't drink alcohol, and I don't want to say I don't, because if somebody ever sees me drinking, they're like, "That's not true." So maybe twice a year,
Sure.
maybe, just
Mhm.
maybe occasionally. I'm like, yeah, sure. There's some things that I kind of like the taste, and so I'll have it occasionally.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking two, probably 3 times a year max. Like I'm just not a drinker. I don't know. Maybe I'm a control freak. Who knows? But I actually really just don't like the taste. I mostly drink water. But anyway, there's always this thing with people that drink alcohol to push people that don't to drink. And I've never really understood it. My question is always, what do you care if I drink or don't drink? Like, I've never understood. I mean, I've theorized it, but I'm just curious if you have another explanation to why people are that way. So
Well,
pushy.
we need to look at the setting first. There are some people, for example, wine sommeliers that are enthusiasts with wine, and it is a full experience. They are fulfilled because they love the education. They love learning about the history. They love learning about the concoctions and all of the things that come along with making wine. And those individuals, they're inspired. So they've got a motive
Yeah, it's a little
behind
different.
behind that consuming of the wine. And so that's respectable.
Mhm.
Now, if you were to go to just a local tavern or a pub when people are drinking after their work shift, for example, and they're saying, "Ah, come on, have another beer.
Mhm.
Another beer won't kill you."
Why? Yeah. Why do people say that? Why do they
Well,
care?
because we need to ask ourselves, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing with their life that requires the alcohol? What are they escaping from? What do they need that time off from?
But
And so
are they wanting to feel a sense of control too because they were able to push you to have one more drink? Like why are people like, because that's very common, exactly what you're saying. Oh, come on, just one more. Just one more. It's not gonna hurt you. Just one more. It's like, well, what do you get out of pushing me to drink one more drink?
the saying goes, misery loves company, does it not?
True.
Right? So these individuals that are saying that language, they're unfulfilled. And so they derive comfort knowing that they're now being partnered up with another person that's in misery with them and drinking their sorrows away.
Mhm.
Right now, there's that's another extreme. I'm sure when you were in your 20s and your teens, you were having a good time with your friends and exploring and drinking and partying and all of that things. We
So
all did it.
okay.
So did
So
I.
so sometimes it could be that setting of partying where it's like, I'm just having a really good time. I want you to have a good time too. So I'm having a good time by drinking alcohol. How about you do the same? Like, do you think it can be that way at times?
Sure, there's always going to be different types of influences and factors to consider.
Yeah.
But if
Let's do a house party, not even a house party. Like, you go to somebody's house and they're pouring themselves a drink. Like, they don't want to drink alone. And they're like, come on, just have a drink with me. Come on, have a
well,
drink.
it's because they're not educated. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. If you know the ramifications of what alcohol does to you, to your liver, to your brain, to your body, to your gut, why are you
Mhm,
going to drink it?
mhm.
Period. And then if you value yourself enough,
Values.
yeah, of course, everything boils down to values.
Yes.
Then you won't drink. I'm going to give you your audience another something to make note of. When you are in the pursuit of your highest values, which is also known as your telos, it's the study of teleology as Aristotle puts it, and Napoleon Hill calls it your chief aim, right? I've learned much of this from Dr. John DeMartini and other philosophers. But when you are in alignment with something that's truly, truly inspiring, that means every day you're totally lit up, you're inspired.
Mhm.
And if you're pursuing things that are inspiring and that are just highest on your values, are you not in a state of sort of performance? You're performing every day, right? So now you require food to fuel you. You require fuel to fuel you. You require food and fuel to make your brain work, to make your body work, so that you can continue to pursue your highest values, the thing that's most important to you, the thing that inspires you. So if that's the case, if you're on purpose and you're pursuing things that are very, very inspiring to you, you're going to eat to perform every day.
Mhm.
When someone is not fulfilled and they're not pursuing their highest values and they're doing things that are less inspiring, they're not going to consider their body as a machine, as a vessel to perform in. And so they're not even going to look at their day-to-day life as an opportunity to perform. And so you can ask your audience this. Let's just say every single one of your viewership and your listenership has an opportunity to speak on stage in 5 days from now, any topic that they want, like their wheelhouse, whether it's
Mhm.
horseback riding or uh, breeding worms for fishing, or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
whatever your absolute wheelhouse is,
Yeah.
and you're the expert on, let's say you got an opportunity to speak on stage in front of 500 people or 1,000 people, and it's your topic.
Mhm.
Would it be fair to say that those individuals are going to start to eat a little bit differently for the next 5 days because they know they want to be on point and they want to make the best delivery ever? Well,
Mhm.
why is that? Because they associated their food and their lifestyle and their choices to something that's truly, truly inspiring for them.
Mhm.
They made the link, but most people aren't making the link. Most people are not living on purpose. And so they don't link the value of eating good, nutritious food to their body because they're not performing every day. So
Mhm.
someone who's ultimately performing every day is going to be a little bit more cognizant towards consuming alcohol. And again, we've got to look at individuals like sommeliers or people that enthusiastically enjoy, let's say, a glass of wine once a week, if they're an executive, for example, or something like that.
Mhm.
That's a different thing. But
Mhm.
even still, an executive might have a glass of wine with a friend. And let's say that friend is also living on purpose and doesn't want to have a glass of wine. I'm going to assume that executive who's also on purpose is going to be less likely to want to push that glass of wine to their friend.
Mhm.
Where when someone is a little bit less inspired, a little bit less fulfilled, they're going to be a little bit more persuasive to push this individual to have some wine or whatever the drink is.
Mhm.
So it all boils down to values.
Yeah. Okay. So next question. How can people start to look at their values? What are questions that you tell people to start asking themselves to figure out their values? Because a lot of people don't really know. They think they know what they value in life, but when you really look at it, it's something totally different sometimes.
Yeah, that's another really, really good question. Our lives demonstrate our values. So we spontaneously pursue things that are inspiring to us. The truth of the matter is, though, most people are unconscious to their behaviors. And so they often label their behaviors or they are comparing their actions to someone else's behaviors. And they feel as though that what they're doing is not valuable. And they label it because they're saying, oh, this person's life is so much better and I'm just a failure and I shouldn't be doing this. But our lives demonstrate our values. And so an easy analogy is a little boy who plays video games and who's inspired to play video games. The little boy doesn't need to be told by the parents, you need to play your video games. No, he's internally inspired to do that. So if you look at my life, for example, my highest values is learning and teaching. If
So
you,
yeah, I mean, what I hear you saying to break it down for people in an easier way, it's what do you just do? What do you just automatically do in your life
what are you
without
inspired to
being
do?
pushed? Yeah, without
That's
being
the
pushed.
operative. Yeah. So it's like, what do you wake up to do and no one needs to tell you to do something,
Mhm.
right? Now, some people might say, I have to go to work. I work 6 days a week and I hate it. I hate my job. Okay, well, why do you do it? Well, because I need to make money. I need to pay rent. Okay, but why do you do that? Why do you need to pay rent? Why do you need to have that job? Well, when I'm not paying rent And when I'm not living in my home, I do this. Oh, okay. So maybe you've got an ulterior motive to work, to have the home so that you can do that, whatever that is. And maybe it's raising a family. Maybe it is going to school. Maybe it's paying for your parents' healthcare because they're sick. Maybe it is helping your sister or your brother who's got a terminal illness. Maybe it's whatever the case may be. There's so many motives.
So,
It maybe,
okay. So that brings up the question though of, is it okay to do things that aren't of your highest value, but support your highest value? Like you're saying, say family is your highest value. You have the job to support your family. Your family's your highest value. So you have to
mm,
have the job. But would you agree to just keep in a job that you don't really value and love? Does this make sense?
of course it does.
Okay.
They're just not conscious of it. So how to bring about conscious awareness is just to ask quality questions. So let's say that job is an assembly line worker and they hate their job,
But do they
but
keep doing it is the question.
but they keep on doing it. Okay, well,
Should they?
why do they do it? Well, should they? If they're on purpose and if they're really, really inspired, they might be able to find a different application. They might wake up their inner entrepreneur. Who knows? But at the same time, why not just find the benefits to that particular action and link it to their highest values? Okay, so how does that, let's say assembling that joint in the car, for example, how does that help benefit your family? And someone's gonna be like, there's no benefit. I'm bored as heck. I hate doing that. No, how does that action benefit your family? And so when we're able to ask those types of questions and find how that actual action benefits their highest values, then they're going to start to be a little bit more inspired to pursue that. And then they see that in fact, that job or that task is actually favorable in helping them pursue their highest values. So it's being able to find the benefits. How does it help? And then they become a lot more inspired to go to work and do it. I'd rather fire someone up than fire them.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because then they can actually value their job and appreciate it. So I feel like we've had so many random conversations, but I feel like we haven't talked about the gut a ton in terms of food. Do you just think food is whatever and doesn't even matter? Like, would you have a number one food to avoid, a number one food to consume? Or it's like you said, just eat the perimeter and you're good. I mean,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that as far as repairing your gut?
Yeah, I don't look at food as pleasurable food. I literally just made a video today because it's at the time of our recording, it's around Easter time. And I just made a very challenging video on why parents shouldn't be giving their kids Easter chocolate, right? Just point blank. There's no benefit to giving your kid just a sugar bomb during a weekend. So with regards to foods, there's some basic foods that I stay away from. Gluten, oats, most grains, lentils, for example. I try to stay away from processed foods.
Why lentils? I do like lentils.
Well, they're high in lectins and they're high in oxalates. And so they are enzyme inhibitors. And those types of foods have more sort of an anti-nutrient profile than more of a dense nutrient profile. So what I mean by that is when we consume some of these foods that are higher in lectins or oxalates for that matter, they impede the body's ability to utilize enzymes and absorb the other cofactors in the foods. And so when you can avoid foods that inhibit those enzymes, then ultimately you're going to absorb more nutrients because you're not consuming the foods that inhibit the absorption of other micronutrients. So I just stay away from those foods. And most people can't even digest them anyways. They cause a lot of gas and bloating.
Right.
So I stay away from foods that cause bloating. I stay away from foods that have anti-nutrients. I stay away from foods that are high in lectins, for example. If you're familiar with Dr. Gundry's work or your viewership and your listenership, lectins are basically plant chemicals that are designed to prevent them from being eaten by their predators. And when you consume these plant chemicals, they can actually render a little rodent paralyzed because they're so toxic to the body. But here we are humans, many of us are eating these lectins every single day. And
Okay, I feel like I can hear people going,
system?
"What are lectin foods?" People are like, "Which
Just
ones are the
go research Dr. Gundry's work. I'm not going to go in detail, but just search lectins, lectins. And you'll discover that these plants don't want to be eaten. Many of them don't want to be eaten. In fact, many years ago, I was living at my home with my sister and my mom, and my sister had a garden. And this cute little chipmunk was hijacking some of the little cherry tomatoes. And one day we saw the chipmunk run with the tomato and intuitively peel all the skin off the tomato and avoid all of the seeds. Why? Because the seeds and the skin are the highest count of the lectins in the tomato. So it intuitively knew to eat the inside of the tomato and avoid the seeds and the skin, because those compounds of the plant have chemicals and they don't want to be consumed. And if you do, it's poison for the body. And so what's the difference between an animal or a rodent eating the lectins or the human? It just means that we're a lot more we can punish ourselves a little bit more without seeing the ramifications compared to a tiny little rodent, but it still has the same impact. And so if you follow Dr. Alessio Fasano's work, and even Dr. Gundry, Dr. Fasano is about gluten, but if you continuously consume these foods that have anti-nutrients and plant chemicals, it's going to cause an ongoing immune response. And if you continuously stimulate your immune response, you're going to tire it. And depending on your weakest link in your genetics, that's where sickness expresses itself.
Okay, so let's talk about gluten. I'm gluten-free, my family's gluten-free, but I know a lot of people will say you can eat gluten if you eat it out of the country.
Sure.
You know, if you go to Italy, if you go somewhere else, like people say with
Yeah.
celiac, they can eat anything they want. And obviously, it's because of the high pesticides that we have here in the US with our foods. But what is your thought on that? Like, would you eat gluten out of the country or just not at all?
Yeah, it's not just the pesticides and the glyphosate and all of those things. It is the proteins of the wheat. Now, I had a great conversation with Dr. Tom O'Brien. He's a good friend of mine and a colleague. Him and I were shooting a really good podcast in Costa Rica a little while ago and just talking about gluten. And I said the same question. What about individuals that go to Europe and they say that they can have pasta or whatever and they don't have any issues? Only 20% of individuals that consume gluten are consciously aware of the side effects that are correlated to their gut. What I mean by that is 20% of the individuals that consume gluten will experience a gut-related symptom: gas, bloating, heartburn, flatulence, constipation, or diarrhea. Those are usually the top contributors. Of those 80%, there's still an issue. There's still a response. There is still an autoimmune response. There are still little attacks happening from these gluten proteins and peptides going to the body, causing an immune response. There's a study that Dr. Alessio Fasano did, and the study had 4 different control groups. I believe it was celiac, celiac in remission, non-celiac, and then those with no sign whatsoever of any gluten sensitivities. They observed that every single person in those control groups, when they consumed gluten, it initiated transient permeability, which means the opening of the cells opened up in the gut, and it caused hyperpermeability, leading to an immune response. Every single human. And so only 20% are consciously feeling the consequences of consuming gluten. But the other 80%, they're like, oh, when I go to Europe, I can eat it. I've got no issues. But the truth of the matter is, every single person has an immune response when they consume gluten. So there is a little bit of a truth behind eating gluten foods in Europe. Yes, they're not as sprayed as heavily with glyphosate and other pesticides and herbicides as they are in Canada. Some of those grains are not hybridized as much as they are in the United States. So there's some truth to that. The only way that I would recommend when you consume gluten would be something that is non-hybridized. It is a heirloom grain that's very, very old. They're not popular anymore. I think one's called einkorn that you can use as a wheat. And typically these individuals don't have issues because the enzymes, the body can break down a heck of a lot easier than typical gluten. And so this is a quote from Dr. Tom. I would love a croissant. I would love one. I really would. But when you do functional testing and you can look at the blood work of an individual that's consumed gluten, you'll see IgA and IgG responses. And so when someone consumes gluten, you'll see how fast of a response there is with the immune system, and then you'll see how delayed of a response there is. And some of these ongoing delayed responses can be up to 6 months. So even if you're really rigid and you don't have gluten, then you got a little slip up, a little treat, and then you're avoiding gluten and you have another little treat, on the back end, on the inside of your body, there's still inflammation happening. There's still an immune response happening. Why would we knowingly continuously activate our immune system trying to attack these foreign invaders that don't belong in the first place when we can just avoid them altogether, so that when we are exposed to other things, our immune system can do its job and attack those rather than being utilized for the gluten and those peptides and simultaneously to our day-to-day exposures.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that kind of do this with the gluten free. It's like when convenient sort of thing. And I'm like,
Sure.
what's the point?
One little piece of gluten can have a response for up to 6 months. It's just not worth it. That's why I do testing. You do a test, you see the proof in the pudding, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize that, 4 weeks ago I had a little piece of pizza and I still have an immune response. People don't trust you. People don't believe that until they see the results. And when you see the results, it really solidifies best case scenario is just being avoidant of gluten.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for coming on. For people that are listening, if they want to find you, where can they find you?
Sure. I've got an Instagram page known as the Gut Whisperer. I've got a YouTube page. I think you can just search Brendan Coates or the Gut Whisperer. I'm also the founder of Canada's largest wellness and biohacking expo. It's called Longevity Summit Canada.
Okay.
And we are in our third year this August in Toronto, August 9th, 10th, and 11th. And I'm very, very enthusiastic and excited to do that because ultimately we've got some incredible speakers. In fact, Dr. Tom is going to be there. Dr. John is going to be keynote speaking.
Amazing.
Over the span of 3 days. What my mission and vision is to allow consumers an opportunity to see different types of biohacking modalities, cold plunges, red light therapies, vagus nerve stimulators, red light therapies, all sorts of different modalities that typically are very difficult to find, or like you can't see them because they're all sold online. And so we've got 60 vendors that are going to be there. We're expecting over 1,000 people over the span of 3 days. Try out, learn.
I have not been to yours, but my husband did go to the Dave Asprey one here in Texas last year, and he loved it because, like you're saying, you're able to go and try all the different things and just see if you like any of them. Because yes, some of them are very hard to get your hands on.
Of course.
So yeah, I want to do the one it's like a vagus nerve stimulator. I think it's through the ear. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about.
I'm not sure. I've seen a couple. There's a few.
But it's not even near me. My husband's like, you got to try this. But it's like, there's one that's several hours from us. Like we don't, so some of these things are very hard to get your hands on, but
Right.
it's really great when, like you're saying, you bring it to
Yeah.
one location where people can try it and see if it's worth the drive sometimes.
course.
To go,
Yep.
you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. And ultimately, for your viewership and your listenership, it's wise for you to try to disconnect from all the distractions out there and give yourselves permission to tap into your higher self, tap into your ontological calling. Because when you start to awaken your magnificence that's already within you, you really start to live a life on purpose. And that's when you start to look at food a little bit differently and how you perceive things a little bit differently. So if I were to leave you with anything, just find your purpose and start to honor that, because we all want to honor ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks so much.